The world is mine, it can be yours, my friend. So why don't you pretend?
What is your connection to Susan Messing, which makes you the perfect playmate in her show, Messing with a Friend?
Well, so I met Susan for the first time at the 50th anniversary party, and I think I had mentioned this to you before, that she was like this force of nature, and so I didn't know who she was, but I saw her talking to someone. I'm like, oh my God, who's that? And they're like, that's Susan Messing. I'm like, oh. And so that was the first time I met her. And then also when I would visit, she's such a natural improviser that you just wind up doing bits with her in the kitchen all the time, because that's just what happens when there's just a bunch of improvisers. So I reached out to her, and she was teaching a class at University of Chicago. So she invited me to come, and I watched, and then I spoke to the class a little bit. And then she just said, I got this show. Would you like to do it? I'm like, yes. And so we got a date, and we did that early November.
Oh, wow.
And it went really well. It was really fun, full house. And it was just really fun. And we were like, let's do it again. And so it kind of got like that.
What instincts do you need to remind yourself of before you go to practice the art of improv, which you gained in your early days in Chicago?
I would say the thing I have to remind myself of the most is listening, especially now that I've been writing for so long, because I'll want to establish. We had this thing happen when I did the show last time where we got the suggestion. Also, I agreed to do the show because I thought it was going to be like Susan taking care of things, doing different games, or so that it was going to be like short improv games or whatever. And then we got one suggestion, and we improvised for an hour, and it was crazy. So it was just a lot of fun, but there were moments where if I felt like the audience wasn't clear, that I would find a way to say the thing to make it real clear, because, it's improv. And so some stuff doesn't quite track. So listening so that I can really hear whatever is being said, and then I can organically respond.
All right, going back to your days in the Second City in the 80s, what was the process when you first approached him, when you got the audition to join one of the troupes and finally getting the opportunity to perform? Was there a process back then?
Well, it wasn't like it is now with the conservatory and everything. And I don't even know how it is now, because the people that bought it are the guys that own Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, I know.
So I have no idea what the shows are like, or I don't know what's happening now, but suffice it to say, but when I started with all my pals, we used to take classes at Victory Gardens. Rob Riley and Rick Thomas would teach there. And but we all started at the Players Workshop, which was on Fullerton, right near Wrightwood. And they had like 5 levels, and it wasn't cheap. So I guess in some ways that was a mini conservatory. But then we would just keep doing shows. We would do sketch shows, improv shows all over town. We had a show called Sons of the Desert versus Green Bay. We did it at the Ginger Man every Tuesday night. Deja vu. I worked there.
You worked there? What? I used to live in that neighborhood.
What was his name? Who owned it? Jim?
Oh, I can't remember.
He loved improv. He loved it.
That's great.
I got a job there working in the day, and I would make chili and coleslaw for whoever would come in for lunch. And I would fucking be so high. And I'd go in there. I was on unemployment from my elevator job. And then I was working there under the table. I was like a gazillionaire. And then I would just do improv constantly.
That's great. So when did you get the audition for Second City? How'd that come about?
Oh, so I think what happened was, if you were around town and you had a little bit of a name or reputation, they knew everybody. Joyce, Sheldon, those guys knew who was up and coming. So I went to the American Academy in New York for like a summer, and then I moved there. And I thought, because I always wanted to go there. And then I got a call that they were having auditions in Chicago. and that, she wanted me to come. So I flew back, and then it kind of all started from there. I auditioned.
Awesome. It's been a while since we've spoken. What projects have you been working on that you're particularly proud of? And how does that add to the process of navigating the general show business environs?
Well, I'm in the process of trying to cast my first movie that I've been working on for like 6 years. Actually, it's funny. New Year's Eve, I guess it was like 2015 or 16. Me and my husband went to visit Adam McKay and Shira at a house that they were renting for the holiday. And I had an idea, like a 2-line pitch. And this is when he was getting nominated for Vice? No, The Big Short.
Ah,
Oh,
yes.
I should preface by saying Adam's company, Hyper Objects, him and his partner, him and his associate are producing my film.
Great.
So he's been attached since the very beginning,
Okay.
giving me notes and, so he's been attached from the beginning. So I pitched him a 2-line thing, and I knew he was going to be heavy into press, for The Big Short because of the Oscar nomination, blah, blah, blah. So after all that ended, I texted him and said, so you still want to hear this idea? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I think I might have said fancy pants. Do you want to hear this idea? And because, we met at SNL. We started the same year. At any rate, I went in with a 4-page pitch and pitched it to him, and he loved it. And then I just started writing it. And so that was that. So in terms of the second part of your question, how does that help me navigate showbiz environs? Don't ever say environs if you're not talking about some kind of fucking beetle infestation. No, so what it helped me navigate is to try on a different hat. So instead of always writing TV, and interestingly enough, when you and I were talking before and you brought up I'm Dying Up Here, it wasn't until I did I'm Dying Up Here that I had the confidence to write a movie.
Interesting.
Because that was a 70-page script. And I'm like, you know what? 30 more pages, I got a movie. And it had so many moving parts. It made me feel like, well, if I can do this, I can totally do that.
Well, here we are in the holidays in Chicago, of course. And what is your most holiday in Chicago tradition, or just even the family tradition growing up on the Great South Side?
It was Christmas Eve at my grandma Ori's.
Nice.
Grandma Ori Caponera. Super Italian Christmas Eve. Thin red gravy with a little bit of calamari thrown in at the end. Beef. Big Italian salad. There's this restaurant called Gio's on 27th and Low, or 29th and Low down here.
Yeah.
They make their salad dressing exactly like my grandma did.
Wow.
Of course, it was bread, and I think it was homemade linguine. No, I think there's some Italians that were probably more Italian than me. I mean, my grandfather didn't speak English, and he called us all into the kitchen one by one and gave us $1. But as far as the meal, I know some Italian feasts had a little more fish than us, I think.
All right.
Because we grew up surrounded by meatpacking plants. I had a meatpacking plant every fucking 4 feet.
All right, finally, how would you describe your upcoming Messing with a Friend show to a Southside relative who doesn't really understand what you do? Who would you picture, and how would you convince them to come?
Well, I think the premise of that statement, how would I convince them to come, I think is the part that doesn't quite track. Because I'd be like, they'd find out I'm doing a show, and I would be like, no. I would just say stuff like, we just get up on stage and walk around and, I don't know, what would I say? Make up stuff. Make up stuff.
This is Patrick McDonald for HollywoodChicago.com. Copyright 2021.